Jake Morrison sat in the back row of the xenobiology classroom, watching as other cadets filed in for their morning lecture. The Galactic Military Academy buzzed with its usual mix of alien languages and nervous energy. Students from 12 different species filled the metal chairs, their various forms creating a colorful display of the galaxy's diversity. Commander Veltar entered the room with his typical stern expression. The Xanthari instructor stood 7 feet tall, his reptilian scales catching the artificial light. His yellow eyes swept across the classroom as students quickly took their seats. "Today we will observe something special," Veltar announced, his voice carrying the authority of decades in military service. "You will witness behavior that challenges everything you think you know about predator species." Jake raised an eyebrow but remained relaxed in his chair. Growing up on the farming colonies of Earth's outer rim had taught him to stay calm around dangerous animals. While his classmates shifted nervously, he simply waited to see what would happen. 2 large transport cages rolled into the classroom on metal wheels. The cages were made of thick steel bars with energy barriers humming between them. Inside the dim interiors, Jake could see movement. Something large shifted in the shadows. Lisa Grant, Jake's study partner and one of the few other humans in their class, leaned over from the seat beside him. "What do you think they brought us this time?" she whispered. Before Jake could answer, Veltar spoke again. "These are juvenile Vorthak. They are 6 months old and already weigh over 200 pounds each." The entire classroom went silent. Even the usually chatty Helian students stopped their crystal-like humming. Everyone knew about the Vorthak. They were the apex predators of the outer rim, creatures so dangerous that most species avoided their homeworlds entirely. Jake studied the cages more carefully. He could see 6-legged forms moving inside, each roughly the size of an earth lion. Their crystalline claws clicked against the metal floors as they paced. Despite their fearsome reputation, Jake felt more curious than afraid. "The cubs will be released for behavioral observation," Veltar continued. "You will remain in your seats and make no sudden movements. Dr. Kessian will monitor their behavior while I maintain safety protocols." Dr. Kessian stepped forward from where she had been standing near the wall. The Aelorian scientist was an insect-like species with compound eyes that could track multiple objects at once. Her thin limbs moved with precise, calculated motions as she activated her recording equipment. "Remember," she said in her high-pitched voice, "these are intelligent creatures. They can sense fear and aggression. Stay calm." Cadet Thyros, a Xanthari student who usually sat in the front row, raised his scaled hand. "Commander, is this safe? My species has protocols about Vorthak encounters." "The cubs are young," Veltar replied. "They pose minimal threat if proper precautions are followed." Jake noticed that most of his classmates had moved as far back in their seats as possible. Some of the smaller species looked ready to run, but Jake remained comfortable, leaning slightly forward with interest. The first cage opened with a mechanical hiss. A young Vorthak emerged slowly, its 6 legs moving with natural grace. The creature was covered in dark fur with silver markings along its spine. Its eyes were large and intelligent, scanning the room with careful attention. The second cage opened moments later. Another cub stepped out, this one slightly smaller with lighter coloring. Both creatures stood perfectly still, taking in their new environment. Jake watched as the cubs ignored the instructors completely. They showed no interest in the recording equipment or the safety barriers. Instead, both predators turned their attention directly toward the students. The classroom held its breath as the cubs began to move. Their crystalline claws made soft clicking sounds on the metal floor. Students pressed themselves back against their chairs, trying to become as small as possible. But the cubs walked past the front rows, without even glancing at the nervous alien students. They moved with purpose, as if they knew exactly where they wanted to go. Jake realized they were heading straight toward him. Lisa grabbed his arm. "Jake, don't move," she whispered urgently. The larger cub reached Jake's row first. It stopped directly in front of his desk and looked up at him with bright, intelligent eyes. The second cub joined its companion, sitting down on the other side of Jake's chair. The room was completely silent except for the soft humming of the air recycling systems. Every eye was focused on the human cadet who now sat between 2 of the galaxy's most feared predators. Jake looked down at the cubs calmly. "Hello there," he said softly. The larger cub made a low rumbling sound that wasn't quite a growl. It sounded almost like a greeting. The smaller one tilted its head, studying Jake's face with curious eyes. Fascinating, Dr. Kessian whispered, her recording equipment capturing every moment. They have chosen to approach the human specifically. Commander Veltar stepped closer, but the cubs paid him no attention. They remained focused entirely on Jake, who sat perfectly still and relaxed. Cadet Morrison, Veltar said carefully, do not make any sudden movements. I won't, Jake replied calmly. He had dealt with plenty of dangerous farm animals back home. These creatures might be alien predators, but they were still young animals far from their home world. The larger cub moved closer to Jake's chair. To everyone's amazement, it lay down beside his desk like a giant dog. The smaller one followed suit, settling down on Jake's other side. Other students stared in shock. Cadet Mirren, one of the crystalline Helians, made a sound like wind chimes in a storm. How is this possible? She whispered. Dr. Kessian was frantically taking notes. This behavior is completely unprecedented. Fourth-act cubs typically show aggression or fear in new environments, but they appear to be seeking comfort from the human. Jake slowly extended one hand toward the larger cub. Is this okay? He asked quietly. The cub sniffed his hand carefully, then gently bumped its head against Jake's palm. Its fur was surprisingly soft despite its fearsome appearance. Incredible, Veltar muttered. In 30 years of military service, I have never seen anything like this. The smaller cub made a soft chirping sound and moved even closer to Jake's chair. Both creatures seemed completely content to stay exactly where they were. What should we do? Lisa asked, still gripping her chair tightly. We observe, Dr. Kessian said, her compound eyes reflecting the classroom lights. This could change everything we know about Vorthak behavior and interspecies relations. Jake looked down at the two cubs who had claimed him as their own. He had no idea that this moment would change not only his life, but the future of the entire Galactic Military Academy. 3 days had passed since the cubs first chose Jake Morrison as their companion. What was supposed to be a 1-hour demonstration had turned into something nobody at the Galactic Military Academy had ever seen before. The cubs refused to leave Jake's side. They followed him to the cafeteria, waited outside his dormitory room, and even attended his other classes. Academy staff had tried several times to return them to their holding area, but the young Vorthak would only grow agitated until Jake appeared again. Jake sat in the Academy's main study hall, working on his tactical planning homework while Crix and Zara lounged beside his table. He had learned their names from Dr. Kessian's translation equipment. Crix was the larger male, more protective and alert. Zara was the female, smaller but more curious about everything Jake did. This is completely insane, Lisa said, settling into the chair across from Jake. She kept a careful distance from the cubs, though they had never shown any aggression toward her or anyone else. Half the Academy is terrified to come near you. Jake looked up from his datapad. They're just scared because they don't understand. Crix and Zara aren't dangerous. They're just young animals away from home. As if responding to their names, both cubs raised their heads. Zara made a soft trilling sound that Jake had learned meant contentment. She had started copying some of his movements during physical training sessions, which amused the instructors and amazed the xenobiology department. Dr. Kessian approached their table, her compound eyes focusing on the cubs. Cadet Morrison, I have the results from yesterday's behavioral tests. Jake set down his stylus. What did you find? The bond you have formed with these cubs is unlike anything in our scientific literature, Dr. Kessian explained, pulling out her datapad. They respond to your emotional state, mirror your calm behavior, and show protective instincts toward you specifically. Crix lifted his massive head and looked at Dr. Kessian. The cub's intelligent eyes studied the insect-like scientist for a moment before returning his attention to Jake. There was no hostility, just careful observation. But why me? Jake asked. What makes me different from everyone else? That is what we are trying to determine, Dr. Kessian replied. Commander Veltar believes it has something to do with your background. You grew up around dangerous wildlife on the farming colonies, correct? Jake nodded. My family raised livestock on the frontier worlds. We had to deal with predators all the time. My father taught me that most animals just want to be left alone, and if you respect them, they'll respect you. Fascinating, Dr. Kessian muttered, making notes. Your calm confidence may have signaled to the cubs that you were a suitable pack leader. Pack leader? Lisa asked, leaning forward despite her nervousness. Vorthak are pack hunters, Dr. Kessian explained. In their society, cubs attach themselves to the strongest and most stable adult in their group. Jake's behavior triggered their natural instincts to follow him. Captain Blake Howard approached their table with his usual commanding presence. The human officer who served as the Academy's commandant looked tired, as if he had been dealing with difficult situations all week. Morrison, we need to talk, Captain Howard said, pulling up a chair. Both cubs immediately became more alert, sensing the change in atmosphere. Sir, Jake replied. I just received a message from Vorthak Prime, Captain Howard said seriously. The cubs' families want them back. They're sending a delegation to retrieve them. Jake felt his stomach tighten. He looked down at Crix and Zara, who had become constant companions over the past few days. When? They'll arrive next week, Captain Howard replied. Jake, I want you to understand something. The Vorthak are not like other species. They view this bonding as either an insult to their culture or a sign of weakness in their cubs. Dr. Kessian's antennae twitched nervously. Captain, the scientific value of this relationship could revolutionize our understanding of interspecies cooperation. I understand that, Doctor, Captain Howard said. But we cannot risk a diplomatic incident. The Vorthak have never been fully integrated into the Galactic Defense Alliance. This could set back relations by decades. Jake reached down and gently scratched behind Crix's ears. The large cub leaned into his touch, rumbling contentedly. What if they don't want to go? That may not matter, Captain Howard said sadly. Vorthak law gives the elders complete authority over their young. Over the following days, news of the coming delegation spread throughout the academy. Students and instructors whispered in hallways about what might happen, some worried about diplomatic consequences, while others were fascinated by the unprecedented bond between human and predator. Jake continued his normal routine, but he could feel the weight of approaching change. During combat training, Crix and Zara had begun participating in exercises without being asked. They seemed to understand tactical movements and worked together with Jake in ways that amazed the instructors. In one memorable simulation, Jake's squad faced overwhelming odds in a capture-the-flag scenario. The cubs watching from the sidelines suddenly joined the exercise. Using their natural hunting instincts, they flanked the opposing team while Jake coordinated the main assault. The combination of human strategy and Vorthak pack hunting created a devastating effectiveness. This changes everything, Commander Veltar had said afterward. We have never seen coordination like this between different species. But Jake knew the demonstration might have made things worse. If the Vorthak delegation saw their cubs following human military commands, they might view it as an even greater insult. The night before the delegation's arrival, Jake sat in his dormitory room with Crix and Zara curled up on the floor beside his bed. He had been studying everything he could find about Vorthak culture, trying to understand what he was facing. Lisa knocked on his door. Can I come in? Sure, Jake replied, setting aside his reading material. She entered carefully, still nervous around the cubs despite days of exposure. How are you holding up? I keep thinking about what my father used to say, Jake said. He told me that animals choose their companions for reasons we don't always understand, but those reasons are usually good ones. Zara lifted her head and looked at Jake with her bright, intelligent eyes. She made a soft questioning sound as if sensing his worry. Maybe the cubs chose you because they knew you would fight for them, Lisa suggested. Jake looked down at his unusual companions. Crix had one large paw resting against Jake's leg, a gesture that had become his way of offering comfort. These weren't just animals anymore. They had become friends, partners, and something he had never expected to find at the academy. I don't know what tomorrow will bring, Jake said, but I won't let them take Crix and Zara without a fight. Even if that fight is just proving that this bond means something important. Outside his window, the stars wheeled slowly through space, carrying the Vorthak delegation closer to a confrontation that would test everything Jake had learned about courage, friendship, and what it meant to be human in a galaxy full of different species. The Vorthak delegation ship docked at Nexus Station with a sound that resonated through the Academy's hull like distant thunder. Jake stood at the observation deck window, watching the massive vessel settle into its berth. The ship was built like a weapon, all sharp angles and dark metal, reflecting the warlike culture of its creators. Crix and Zara pressed against his legs, sensing his tension. Over the past week they had grown even more protective, rarely letting Jake out of their sight. Other students gave them an even wider berth now, knowing that the Cubs' fate would soon be decided. "The delegation has requested an immediate meeting," Captain Howard said, approaching from behind. "They want to see you and the Cubs in the main conference hall." Jake nodded, his mouth dry. He had spent every free moment studying Vorthak customs and language, but he still felt unprepared for what was coming. "How many of them are there?" "5 elders, including Krix's grandfather," Captain Howard replied grimly. "Jake, I want you to know that whatever happens, the Academy supports you. What you've accomplished with these Cubs is remarkable." The main conference hall had been cleared of its usual furniture and set up for the meeting. A large table dominated the center of the room, with chairs arranged for both human and alien physiology. Jake entered with Krix and Zara at his sides, feeling the weight of dozens of watching eyes. The Vorthak delegation was already seated. 5 massive predators, each over 8 feet tall with the scars and bearing of experienced warriors. Their fur was darker than the Cubs', marked with intricate patterns that Jake recognized as symbols of rank and achievement. Elder Krexith sat at the center of the group. He was the largest Vorthak Jake had ever seen, his massive frame covered in the silver-streaked fur of advanced age. Scars crisscrossed his arms and chest, telling stories of countless battles. His eyes, the same bright intelligence as Krix's but harder with experience, fixed on Jake immediately. "So," Krexith said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the floor, "you are the alien who has corrupted our young." Jake felt Krix tense beside him, but the Cub remained still. "I haven't corrupted anyone, sir. Krix and Zara chose to stay with me." "Chose?" Another elder, female with distinctive white markings, spoke sharply. "Cubs do not choose. They obey their elders and follow the traditions of their people." Dr. Kessian stepped forward from where she had been standing with the Academy staff. "Elders, if I may present our findings. The behavioral data shows a genuine bond based on mutual respect and protection." Krexth's eyes never left Jake. "Young human, do you know what you have done? These Cubs were sent here to observe and learn about other species. Instead, they have forgotten their heritage and follow an alien like pack animals." "They haven't forgotten anything," Jake replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "They're still Vorthak. They're still proud, intelligent, and strong. They've just learned that they can work with others." "Work with others?" Krexth stood, his full height making him tower over everyone in the room. "We are Vorthak. We do not work with others. We lead, we hunt, we conquer. We do not follow aliens who smell of fear and weakness." Jake felt anger rising in his chest, but before he could respond, Krix moved. The young Vorthak stepped forward, placing himself between Jake and his grandfather. He made a deep rumbling sound that Jake had never heard before. The room fell silent. Even the Vorthak elders looked surprised. "Krix speaks in the old tongue," Krexith said slowly. "He says you are not weak, human. He says you are pack leader." Zara joined her brother, also moving to face the elders. She made similar sounds, her young voice carrying clear determination. "They both say this," the female elder translated, her voice filled with confusion. "They claim pack bond with the alien." Krexith studied Jake for a long moment. "Human, what is your name?" "Jake Morrison, sir. Jake Morrison," Krexith repeated, testing the alien sounds. "My grandson believes you are worthy of pack bond. This is unprecedented. No alien has ever been accepted by our young in this way." Commander Veltar stepped forward. "Elder Krexith, we have observed remarkable cooperation between Cadet Morrison and your Cubs. They have worked together in ways that suggest new possibilities for military cooperation. You speak of military matters." Krexith's eyes sharpened with interest. "Show me." Captain Howard activated the room's holographic display system. Combat footage from the previous week appeared in the air above the conference table. The recording showed Jake coordinating with Krix and Zara during training exercises, their movements flowing together like a single unit. The Vorthak elders watched in silence as the Cubs demonstrated tactical awareness that surprised even their own people. They saw Zara learning human hand signals and Krix responding to Jake's strategic commands, while adding his own predatory instincts to their attacks. "This is impressive," admitted the female elder, "but it proves our point. These Cubs have abandoned Vorthak ways to follow alien methods." "Have they?" Jake asked, finding courage he didn't know he possessed. "Or have they found a way to be more than just Vorthak?" "They're still everything they were before, but now they're also something new. Krexth walked around the table, moving with the deadly grace of his species. Krix and Zara remained alert but calm, protecting Jake without threatening their elder. "You speak boldly for one so small," Krexth said. "But bold words are easy. Actions prove worth." "Then let me prove it," Jake said before he could stop himself. "Give me the chance to show that this bond makes all of us stronger, not weaker." The old Vorthak warrior stopped directly in front of Jake. Up close, the human could see the intelligence and cunning that had made Krexith a legend among his people. "You would undergo the trial of proving?" Krexith asked quietly. Jake had read about the trial of proving during his research. It was an ancient Vorthak ritual used to test potential pack leaders. Few Vorthak ever attempted it, and no alien had ever been permitted to try. "If that's what it takes," Jake replied, his heart pounding. The conference room erupted in shocked murmurs. Captain Howard stepped forward quickly. "Jake, you don't understand what you're agreeing to. The trial of proving has not been attempted by an outsider in 300 years, Krexith said, his voice carrying dark amusement. "The last one died in the first challenge." "I understand the risks," Jake said, though his mouth felt dry as dust. "But Krix and Zara are worth it." Krexith looked down at his grandson, who met his gaze without flinching. The old warrior's expression softened slightly as he saw the determination in the young cub's eyes. "Very well, Jake Morrison," Krexith said finally. "You will come to Vorthak Prime. You will face the trial of proving. If you succeed, you will be recognized as pack friend to these cubs. If you fail," he didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone in the room understood what failure would mean. "I accept," Jake said, surprised by the steadiness of his own voice. Krix and Zara moved closer to him, their warm presence giving him strength. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he would face them for the sake of the bond they had built together. Vorthak Prime was a world of extremes. Jake stepped off the transport ship into air so thin it made his lungs burn, while the planet's heavy gravity made every step feel like carrying extra weight. The ancient amphitheater where the trial would take place was carved from black volcanic rock, its walls rising like jagged teeth against the orange sky. Hundreds of Vorthak had gathered to witness the trial. Jake had never seen so many of the massive predators in one place. Their eyes followed his every movement as he walked across the arena floor, studying the alien who dared to claim pack bond with their young. Krix and Zara followed close behind him, but Jake knew that once the trial began, they would be forbidden from helping. The trial of proving had to be faced alone, or it meant nothing according to Vorthak law. Elder Krexith stood on a platform overlooking the arena, his massive form silhouetted against the setting sun. "Jake Morrison of Earth," his voice boomed across the amphitheater. "You have claimed pack bond with cubs of the Vorthak. This bond must be proven through 3 challenges that test the heart of a true pack leader." Jake nodded, trying to calm his racing pulse. During the journey to Vorthak Prime, he had studied every piece of information available about the trial, but much of it remained secret until the moment of testing. "The first challenge is the Hunt of Shadows," Krexth announced. "You must track and capture a Grex using only the tools our ancestors used before we reached the stars." A Grex was a Vorthak prey animal, Jake remembered from his studies. Fast, intelligent, and equipped with natural camouflage that made it nearly invisible in the rocky terrain of Vorthak Prime. Adult Vorthak hunters sometimes took days to successfully track one. Servants brought Jake a simple spear, a net woven from plant fibers, and a small knife. The tools looked primitive compared to the high-tech equipment he was used to at the academy, but he accepted them without complaint. "The Grex has been released into the hunting grounds," Krexth continued. "You have until sunrise to complete this challenge." The hunting grounds were a maze of rocky canyons and caves that stretched for miles around the amphitheater. Jake made his way into the labyrinth as darkness fell, using skills his father had taught him on the farming colonies. The first few hours were frustrating. Jake found tracks in the dusty ground, but they seemed to lead nowhere. The Grex's camouflage made it nearly impossible to spot even when he was sure it was close. He began to understand why this challenge was so difficult. But as the night wore on, Jake started thinking differently. Instead of trying to hunt like a Vorthak, he used his human advantages. His smaller size let him move through narrow passages where a larger predator couldn't go. His endurance allowed him to maintain steady pursuit when a Vorthak might rely on short bursts of speed. Near dawn, Jake found fresh droppings that told him the Grex was nearby. He began to move more carefully, using techniques he had learned from watching Crix and Zara hunt during their time at the academy. The cubs had taught him things about patience and observation that no textbook could provide. The Grex finally revealed itself when it thought Jake had given up. The creature was beautiful, with silver fur that shifted colors to match its surroundings. It was also fast, but Jake had anticipated its escape route. Using the net with timing his father would have been proud of, Jake captured the Grex just as the sun broke over the canyon walls. He carried his prize back to the amphitheater, exhausted but victorious. The watching Vorthak rumbled their approval. Even Crex looked impressed as Jake released the unharmed Grex back into the wild. "The second challenge is the test of sacrifice," Crex announced after Jake had rested and eaten. "You must choose between your own safety and that of your pack." The challenge took place in a simulated environment created by holographic projectors. Jake found himself standing in a burning building with several Vorthak cubs trapped inside. He had a clear path to escape, but saving the cubs would require him to go deeper into the dangerous structure. Jake didn't hesitate. He rushed toward the trapped cubs using his smaller size to navigate through debris that would have blocked larger rescuers. The holographic flames felt real enough to make him sweat, and the smoke stung his eyes, but he managed to guide all the cubs to safety before the building collapsed. When the simulation ended, Jake was breathing heavily and covered in simulated soot, but he was smiling. The watching Vorthak had been completely silent during the test, but now they began a low humming that Jake realized was their equivalent of applause. "The final challenge is the wisdom of leadership," Crex said, as the sun reached its peak. "You must solve the puzzle of the broken pack." Jake was presented with a tactical scenario that had supposedly stumped Vorthak strategists for generations. Two allied packs were surrounded by enemies in a canyon with no apparent escape route. Traditional Vorthak tactics called for a glorious charge that would result in honorable death, but Jake was asked to find a solution that would save both packs. Jake studied the holographic terrain for a long time. He could see why Vorthak tacticians had struggled with this problem. Their warrior culture emphasized individual courage and direct confrontation. But Jake approached it from a different angle. Instead of thinking about how to fight their way out, Jake looked for ways to avoid the fight entirely. He noticed that the enemy positions had a weakness. They assumed the Vorthak would behave predictably. "The solution isn't to fight," Jake said finally. "It's to change the rules." He outlined a plan that used deception, misdirection, and coordinated movement between the two packs. Instead of charging into battle, one pack would create a diversion while the other escaped through a route the enemies wouldn't expect them to use. Then the first pack would follow, using the confusion to slip away. "This is not the Vorthak way," one of the elders protested. "Where is the honor in running from battle?" "The honor is in bringing your people home alive," Jake replied. "A dead warrior can't protect his pack." Crex was quiet for several long minutes studying Jake's solution. Finally, he spoke. "Your plan would work. More importantly, it shows thinking beyond what we have always done. This is wisdom." The old warrior stood and walked down into the arena. Crix and Zara, who had been forced to watch from the sidelines during all three challenges, finally ran to Jake's side. Their joy at being reunited was obvious to everyone watching. "Jake Morrison of Earth," Crexeth said formally, "you have proven yourself in the hunt of shadows, the test of sacrifice, and the wisdom of leadership. By the ancient laws of our people, I name you pack friend to these cubs." The amphitheater erupted in sounds Jake had never heard before. The Vorthak were celebrating, their deep voices combining in harmonies that made the ground vibrate beneath his feet. Crexeth placed one massive hand on Jake's shoulder. "You have shown us that strength comes in many forms, young human. Perhaps it is time for our people to learn new ways of being strong." As Jake knelt to embrace Crix and Zara, he realized that the trial had changed more than just his relationship with the cubs. He had proven that humans could earn respect from even the most feared predators in the galaxy, not through force or technology, but through courage, wisdom, and the willingness to put others before themselves. The journey back to the academy would bring new challenges, but Jake now carried with him the knowledge that bridges could be built between any species willing to try. 6 months had passed since Jake's return from Vorthak Prime, and the Galactic Military Academy buzzed with changes that nobody had expected. The news of a human completing the trial of proving had spread across the galaxy, creating ripples that reached the farthest corners of known space. Jake walked across the Academy's main courtyard with Crix and Zara at his sides. The Cubs had grown considerably during their time away from home, but they remained as devoted to Jake as ever. Other students no longer avoided them with fear. Instead, Jake noticed curious glances and respectful nods from species that had once considered humans to be just another minor race. "Morrison," Captain Howard called from the steps of the administration building. "Conference room now!" Jake made his way inside, wondering what new development awaited him. The past few months had brought a constant stream of visitors, researchers, and diplomatic delegations all wanting to understand the bond between human and Vorthak. The conference room was filled with representatives from a dozen different species. Jake recognized several high-ranking military officials and ambassadors. Dr. Kessian sat at one end of the table, surrounded by datapads and recording equipment. Cadet Morrison, Admiral Chen, the highest-ranking human officer in the Galactic Defense Alliance, stood as Jake entered. "Please take a seat." Jake settled into a chair while Crix and Zara took their usual positions beside him. The Cubs had learned to remain calm during official meetings, though their intelligent eyes tracked every movement in the room. "Jake," Admiral Chen began, "your success on Vorthak Prime has created opportunities we never imagined possible. Elder Crix has proposed something unprecedented." A holographic display activated above the conference table, showing a star map of the galaxy. Several regions were highlighted in different colors. The Vorthak Confederacy has offered to share patrol duties with Alliance forces in these sectors. Admiral Chen continued. "They're willing to coordinate joint operations under certain conditions." "What conditions?" Jake asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "They want human liaisons assigned to work with their packs," Captain Howard said. "Specifically humans who can form the same kind of bond you've developed with Crix and Zara." Dr. Kessian leaned forward eagerly. "Jake, we've been studying your interactions with the Cubs for months. We believe we understand what makes this bond possible." She activated her datapad, and charts appeared on the holographic display. "It's not just about being calm around predators. It's about a specific combination of emotional intelligence, adaptability, and what we can only describe as pack empathy." "Pack empathy?" Jake asked. "The ability to understand and respond to the emotional needs of a group," Dr. Kessian explained. "Humans seem to have a natural talent for it that other species lack." Ambassador Theron, a tall Zenthari diplomat, spoke up from across the table. "This is all very interesting, but what does it mean practically? Are we talking about a new military program?" Admiral Chen nodded. "The Interspecies Cooperation Initiative. We want to create a new branch of the Defense Alliance focused on building bridges between species that have traditionally been enemies or remained isolated." Jake looked down at Crix and Zara. Both Cubs were listening intently, their intelligence allowing them to follow much of the conversation even if they didn't understand every word. "And you want me to lead this program?" Jake asked. "We want you to help design it," Captain Howard corrected. "You're still a cadet, but your experience has been invaluable. We're creating a new curriculum that combines traditional military training with interspecies psychology and diplomacy." Over the following weeks, Jake found himself working with Academy staff to develop training protocols for the new program. The first volunteers were carefully selected humans who had shown aptitude for working with alien species. The program wasn't limited to working with Vorthak. Representatives from several previously hostile species had expressed interest in similar cooperation agreements. The Kethar, a race of intelligent crystals that had never trusted organic beings, sent observers to study human interaction methods. The Void Swimmers, energy beings from the galaxy's outer rim, established their first embassy in Alliance space. Jake's graduation ceremony became something far beyond a traditional military event. Representatives from over 40 species attended, many of them former enemies or neutral parties that had never participated in Alliance activities before. As Jake stood on the platform in his new uniform, he looked out at an audience that represented the most diverse gathering in galactic history. Crix and Zara flanked him, now fully grown but still clearly devoted to their human pack leader. "Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of all species," Admiral Chen announced, "I present Lieutenant Jake Morrison, the first graduate of the Interspecies Cooperation Initiative. and the youngest officer ever to receive the Galactic Service Cross. The applause that followed came in dozens of different forms. Some species clapped, others hummed, and a few created harmonic vibrations that could be felt through the floor. Jake had never imagined such a sound was possible. Elder Krexith approached the platform, moving with the dignity of his great age and experience. In his hands, he carried something Jake had never seen before, a Vorthak pack medallion made from crystallized Vorthak bone and inscribed with symbols of honor. Jake Morrison, Krexth said in his deep voice that carried across the entire assembly, "You have shown my people that strength comes in many forms. You have taught us that cooperation does not mean weakness, and that bonds between different species can make all of us stronger." He placed the medallion around Jake's neck. "You are pack friend to the Vorthak, but more than that, you are bridge builder to the galaxy." As Jake looked out at the assembled representatives, he saw the future taking shape. Species that had been enemies for centuries were sitting together. Young officers from different worlds were training side by side. The galaxy was changing, and somehow a farm boy from the frontier colonies had helped to start that change. Lisa Grant, now also graduated and assigned to the diplomatic corps, joined Jake on the platform. "Remember when you thought those cubs were just lost animals looking for a friend?" she said quietly. Jake smiled, reaching down to scratch behind Krix's ears. The massive Vorthak leaned into his touch, still making the same contented rumbling sound he had made as a cub. "Maybe they were," Jake replied. "Maybe we all were." Captain Howard stepped forward to address the assembly one final time. "Today marks not just a graduation, but the beginning of a new era. The Interspecies Cooperation Initiative will establish permanent liaison programs with any species willing to participate. Our goal is simple: to prove that working together makes us all stronger than we could ever be alone." In the months that followed, Jake would serve on joint missions with Vorthak packs, negotiate treaties with crystal beings, and help establish the first truly integrated interspecies military units in galactic history. The Academy would expand its programs to include species that had never before participated in alliance activities. But on that graduation day, standing with Krix and Zara beside him and looking out at a galaxy full of possibilities, Jake Morrison understood that he had found his true purpose. He wasn't just a soldier or a diplomat. He was proof that the barriers between species weren't as solid as everyone had believed. The galaxy was vast and full of different kinds of life, but Jake had learned that understanding and friendship could bridge any gap. As he walked down from the platform with his faithful companions, he knew that this was just the beginning of an adventure that would take him to stars he had never imagined visiting, working with species he had never dreamed of meeting. And somewhere in space, on worlds both familiar and strange, other young beings were discovering that cooperation could be more powerful than competition, that friendship could be stronger than fear, and that sometimes the most unlikely bonds could change everything.